This girl falls in love with her wealthy boss, but he only wants her for his games with Delicioso and to make her explode with pleasure. Judith has a delicious relationship with her ex Fernando, whom she swore she would never let kiss her again. She leads a very poor but delicious life. A few months ago, all she could think about was succeeding at work. She puts in even more overtime than the others, but without any extra pay. As she heads out to the parking lot, she hears her colleague Miguel and her boss Monica returning from their lunch break. But before saying goodbye, he gets affectionate. Judith already feels like leaving and prefers to watch the scene. He kisses his boss in a very savory way, and Judith's mouth waters. She can't stand the heat in the car and starts touching herself, climaxing several times. The next day, she arrives at the office as if nothing happened, but in the elevator she meets Eric, a stranger. They're lucky the elevator gets stuck. Judith becomes very nervous. He tries to calm her down and then seems to want to seduce her. Everything stays at the flirting stage, and the elevator starts moving again. He simply gives her his cell phone number so they can stay in touch and exchange nudes. On the way out, it turns out he's one of the big bosses, and she finds herself uncomfortable because of her boss's comments, who later tells her that her proposal isn't good enough and that she needs to rework it. She stays late working on it and hears that her boss is in the office with her colleague who, of course, wastes no time and leaves her Cayetano with everything. Eric is also there and asks her if she likes to watch. She wants to leave, but he tells her to stay and observe. He tries to seduce her and tells her they'll go out tomorrow evening. She refuses because he's her boss, but she's just playing hard to get. The next day, Eric comes to pick her up for dinner. She wasn't expecting it and is annoyed that he showed up without her having given him her address. He apologizes and leaves. He reconsiders and tells her to wait downstairs while he gets ready. After an incredibly long time, this little old man comes out. He's German and even has a driver. On the way, he looks at her a lot because she's a little bombshell he wants to get with. They arrive at the restaurant, which is very sophisticated but looks more like a place where you'd get shot. He orders, but it's so sophisticated that she doesn't like the food. She prefers tacos and canned beer. He has a pleasant time, and at the end he moves closer to her. He shares the dessert, and the German doesn't miss an opportunity. He starts groping her and asks how far she's willing to go. He tells her, "I have a show prepared. It's delicious live, and if you want, you can have an horchata." But she gets scared and leaves upset. Very prim and proper. Judith can't sleep because she thinks she didn't let the monkey stab her, so she texts him, but he doesn't reply. The next morning, seeing that he still hasn't replied, she feels guilty and prefers to play with her cat. There's a knock at the door, and it's Eric who brings her a car because he wanted to see her. He enters the apartment and gets curious. He tells her to get dressed so they can spend the day together. She starts by telling him she has things to do, but the German, who doesn't do things halfway, tells her it's not about him. That gets a reaction out of her. She agrees to go out with him and lets him drive her Porsche. She then invites him to walk the dogs she fosters from a shelter. It's something she does often, but not the German. Later, they arrive at the apartment. She gets comfortable, and what a modest apartment. She offers him a drink and then puts on some music. She tells him his jacket is dirty from the dogs, but before Eric ruins it, she asks if he wants to play. She says yes. So he undresses her, ties her up, and blindfolds her on the bed. He starts caressing her and ends up giving it to her, as he should. He tells her to ask for whatever she wants and records everything. Once they're done, they watch it together, but she's thrown off by the arrival of her best friend. She takes part, and even though she enjoyed the experience, she's quite annoyed with him. She tells him so. Even though he explains that's how he gets his kicks, she doesn't agree with that sort of thing. She goes to work out a bit to let off steam and meets a girl there who's watching her. She then continues watching the video she recorded, and since it turns her on, she even considers hooking up with the girl. The next day at work, she's called into a meeting. She's told she'll now be accompanying him for professional reasons. She'll earn a bonus if she does it, but she decides to decline the offer. She acts like she's the boss in his plan, but he lets her go. She arrives at her apartment to find her cat is doing badly. She takes him to the vet, but is told he has already passed away and that the cat has gone to join St. Peter. She's sad, but Eric happens to come by. He sees she's not doing well and asks what's going on. She's in tears, but he's there to support her. So much so that they fall asleep without making love, which seems to suit them both. The next morning, she even makes him breakfast. She then asks if his offer is serious. She's considering accepting, but doesn't want to play his games. Even if he makes it perfectly clear that's who he is. He doesn't want to fall in love or have a relationship, only to make love in a gentle and deliciously naughty way. She'll think think about it, but the next day she says, "Why not just let me do things my way and share his games?" She ends up accepting to seal the deal. She's going to make love to him. They head to Barcelona on a private jet. Eric receives a mysterious call from a certain Beta, but decides not to answer. They'll be staying in very modest and separate rooms. Later, she texts Eric, but since he doesn't reply, she thinks he's sleeping with someone else. She gets comfortable and prepares her puhina to give herself pleasure with Tokyo. Later, she runs into him. He's with another girl, and she gets a little jealous. Her name is Amanda, and she's the CFO of his company. Even though she can't stand jealousy, she has to put up with it. They're on their way to a meeting, and even though Eric tries to flirt with her, this jealous woman won't be played. During the meeting, Eric texts her, but she, very dignified, doesn't reply. Eric then stands up and interrupts the meeting. He asks everyone to leave except Judith, telling them they need to check something. What he's going to check are her lips, and not the ones on her mouth. He asks what's wrong, and it's clear he can't stand the jealousy. Eric tells her she'd better play along. She removes her underwear, and Eric puts her in position to go to work on her. He makes her climax and says it's delicious. He'll then take her elsewhere and only lets the others back in to continue the meeting. That evening, he takes her somewhere they can indulge in their game. He sits her on a bench and spreads her legs to rub her little treasure while others watch with envy. Whew! Stay there, Manuel. Leaving that place, he takes her to his room to let loose, and Judith ends up with enormous melons. Eric, feeling himself falling in love, decides to leave her as she came into the world and asks her to leave. The next morning, he finds them again. Eric tells her that Amanda will take care of everything and that she can go rest. In other words, she can get lost. She leaves acting like she's the boss, asks the pilot to change course. She goes to her father's place. She hadn't seen her family for a while. She eats with them, and that evening she goes dancing. She was already sad, but someone gives her the eye, and she forgets her troubles as she's taken out to have a good time. And that's how Philippi manages. A well-equipped guy does a woman good. The next day, she goes motocross riding. This girl is versatile. She goes home, and Eric shows up in his luxury car. She finds him a bit unappealing, but since he tells her she's been on his mind and that he wants to be with her, she's already ready to forgive him. Only she doesn't fall for it right away. But when he tells her he wants her in his life, she lets herself be convinced. Her father interrupts them, but since she introduces them, she asks him why he doesn't take him for a ride. He scares him a little because he feels like he's in Fast and Furious. But then they go for a walk, hand in hand, go to eat, and run into his ex-friend. He asks to speak with her for a moment and asks why she got back with him after what he did to her. Judith makes it perfectly clear that he's a good friend, but she wants the rich little old man with the butcher's arms. They go for a walk, and then Eric asks if she wants to meet some friends who are into swinging. They come back to say goodbye before going to the party. On the way, Beta keeps messaging him. He simply tells her he won't reply and that it's none of her business. Since she's a bit out of it, she goes crazy. Eric asks her to stop so he can explain everything. He then confesses that Beta is his ex-girlfriend. He tells her he broke up with her because she slept with his father. Now he no longer speaks to either of them. They arrive with friends, a couple named Frida and Andres, who tells him he knows her because she's the woman who gave him the candy the first time they set off the bomb. Now they can prepare their shada. He asks Eric if they're going to the party, but as if he didn't want to commit, he puts it to Judith, who ends up agreeing. But before that, he gropes her, and they prepare their shada with the other couple. Of course, now he won't miss the party of Desu at the control sign. There are only famous people there who love to party. It's everyone against everyone. Eric introduces her to Alex, a friend who looks at Judith with desire. He takes her hand, and the three of them leave. That's it, Manuel. They're going to do after partying very hard. She wakes up in the house, asks them if they've seen Eric, and they tell her he left. He thought he had warned her, and once again left her like some small-town girlfriend. She picks up her phone to call him, but he doesn't answer. She arrives at her apartment and starts cleaning, to forget everything they put her through that day. She arrives at the office and sees her colleague, who tells her Eric is a nuisance. He then admits he knows Eric was hitting on the boss. They'd love to have a job like that, so they'll mention it in the comments. Judith has decided not to do overtime anymore, so she tells him her bus is leaving and heads to the gym. She sees the girl from earlier, introduces herself, and learns her name is Rebecca. She asks if they can train together, and why not? They even become good friends, and Judith learns a few tricks to get closer to her. The next day at work, her boss calls her in. She announces that she's going to be transferred to the finance department. It's the promotion she was hoping for. At first, she doesn't want it, but since her boss tells her it's her decision, she ends up accepting. Now, as a manager, she'll choose which intern to let go. She talks to her father, and we then learn that they never talked about Judith's mother leaving for San Peter, but that things are going well between them in the end. Later, she watches videos from her childhood, But her carefree days become sadder. But that's fate, my friends. She runs into Eric in the elevator. But even though she ignores him and seems very angry, she goes to his office. She tells him she loves him in front of everyone, so he won't make a scene. She tells him they'll talk at her place. Later, she gives him a massive earful, scared, but that he loves her, and asks her to be his girlfriend. She tells him she doesn't trust him. But Gerardito and his blue eyes. How could she say no? Since everything is going well now, she tells him she wants to play a game. So that evening, she blindfolds him and ties him to the bed. She then calls her gym friend to mess with him while she watches. The girl removes the blindfold. Judith doesn't understand anything. He asks her to untie him, thinking she already knows, not to provoke him. Confesses to her that the ex-girlfriend is a beta, son of her mother. The next day, she calls her boss to tell her she's received her resignation letter. Judith tells her it's a goodbye and sets off with a backpack to keep experiencing horchatas, explosions, and games with Delicioso. What a fighter and an independent woman, and that's how she ended up going on a double date for the Delicioso addicts. Don't make a